Good. Well, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to the September meeting of the Finance Committee. It is September 11th, so we should take note of that day. But saying that, we'll just advance on to the tab 2, to meeting minutes from the when were we last year? July. Yes.
Just moved.
Yes. Yes, it was. Can I get a motion to approve those meeting minutes, please?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. All in favor, aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that carries. We have a couple of matters on the agenda. First up, the amendments. Portia.
Yeah, so behind tab 2, you'll see a memo together with the Finance Committee Charter, both in outline form. The staff is recommending amendments to the Finance Committee Charter. As you know, we brought before the board a number of DASNY recommendations over the course of the last several months. One of the things that staff have indicated that we will do is to go back and look at and review our policies and ensure that the policies were consistent with the one DASNY initiatives that we are undertaking. So the amendments before you today to the Finance Committee Charter basically ensure that this charter is consistent with the discussions that we have been having in the context of one DASNY. There are really three items here that I want to bring to your attention, and they really all have to do with circumstances under which we would bring a transaction back to the Finance Committee for consideration, and there really are three different times when we believe that would be appropriate. The first is if the not-to-exceed amount of the bonds has increased from that which was previously presented. The second would be if the maximum term of the bonds has increased from that which was previously presented. And the third is if the security for the debt that's being proposed is less than what was previously presented. And that issue we spoke about specifically in the context of the financing guidelines changes at the July meeting. So that's really the substance of the changes that are before the members. Any questions?
Thank you. Pretty clear. Question point. Have we done any surprises with that? All right. I just don't know about this requesting and writing by the chair. Think about that one. What kind of writing will that be? This committee parchment paper?
Thanks so much, Dave. That's your favorite comment in me. I really appreciate it.
Anyway, thank you. So can I get a motion to, we just recommend, we approve this today, right? We don't have to, the committee approves it.
Yep.
And then I believe that it does go to the board.
Okay. So am I recommending approval or am I approving? I'm recommending approval.
We're actually doing both in this case because it's the Finance Committee Charter. So we're approving and then recommending that the board.
Onto the board.
Okay, so I'm doing two motions. First, I got a motion to approve this amendment to the charter. The second that?
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. The opposed, none. That carries. And I guess I'm now looking for a motion to recommend approval of what we just approved to the principal.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion carries. What else, Paul? You have something else too?
Yep, there's an additional policy included behind tab 2 in your books, and this has to do with the board financing authorization policy. Again, similar background here, in an effort to look at the policies that really affect the board. We did a review and wanted to ensure that the policies were consistent with the various changes that we have made in connection with the One DASNY initiative. The board financing authorization policy really deals with single approval by the board, and it deals with an initiative that we had discussed, I believe, back a number of years ago in terms of doing a broad capital project list authorization to give flexibility to clients. The changes, I think, fall here into three categories. One, there are technical changes, technical amendments, which really conform the language in the policy to the language that we have been using and employing in connection with One DASNY. So the deletion of references to things like credit and really talking about transaction review as opposed to credit review. That's the first category. The second category really has to, well, let me go back on the technical changes as well. So the conforming changes, so that the transaction review language, and then there's a section here that deals with various diligence matters. And as you know, we have moved in the context of One DASNY some of the time, sort of the time frames associated with some of the elements of diligence to later in the process. So we moved them, for example, from the tax diligence being substantially completed at the point of adoption of documents. We moved that to undertaking that and ensuring that that was completed prior to the mailing of the preliminary official statement. So those kind of changes are reflected here, again, in an effort to achieve consistency with the discussions that we had in connection with One DASNY. That's the first category. The second category is the broad refunding authorization. We have deleted that language in its entirety, given the change that occurred at the end of last year, eliminating the ability to undertake tax-exempt advance refundings. We thought that this language here was really no longer applicable because we were really looking to try to get out ahead of the fundings, and that was really what that language was targeted towards. So, you know, right now, really people are just undertaking current refundings as a matter of standard course. The third category in terms of the change that's made here really has to do with the language under single approval by the board having to do with refundings for private clients that are currently in DASNY's portfolio. This language we have clarified now to specifically state that it includes the refunding of both DASNY bonds and non-DASNY bonds. Previously, we interpreted this language to really address just the bonds that were issued through DASNY. In the spirit of One DASNY, however, we thought that it made sense to come back and take a broader look at this, recognizing that the ability to undertake refundings and using a single approval that would include both DASNY and non-DASNY bonds would be something that would be beneficial in terms of our ability to work with various private clients, and also recognizing that as far as the private client is concerned, undertaking these refundings is really just going to assist them in terms of bringing down their cost of capital. And so ultimately, you know, benefits them and their financial strength. But we did recognize that this was something that was not a technical conforming change. So as a result, you know, we bring it here, we specify that this policy and the changes to this policy were something that we wanted to discuss with the committee, obviously have the discussion with the board as well. So we're not asking for action here, but we did want to present the black line policy to the members for your consideration.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Or?
Yeah, just had one question. Of course, I know you can't see in the future, but just looking back historically of what you've issued bonds in, say, the last year or two, with the single approval by the board policy, if that was changed, what percent of bonds that you typically get before you would now be single resolution?
Yeah, you know what, I'm really not sure. Again, this would affect folks who have issued both through DASNY and through the locals. So, for example, people like Vassar College, University of Rochester, those are folks that come to mind who have bonds, where they've issued both through us and their local development corporation. So for those kinds of clients, it would be useful for us to be able to have this ability to work with them and to be able to undertake, their fundings, in as efficient a manner as possible, and be able to say to them, look, we can really, we can work with you, we can get this done quickly. But as to the specifics, I'd have to go back and look, I'm not really sure.
But today, those type of institutions would require the 2 resolutions?
Correct. So absent this language with the clarification to add in the non-DASNY bonds, we would not have the ability to work with them on a single approval basis. We could do it in the regular traditional 2-step manner, but not in a single approval.
Okay, thank you.
I'm fine with what I'm about to ask you, Portia. I'm fine with the outcome. Under other E, and I think I raised this with you once before, on page 2, staff will conduct the TEFRA hearing prior to board action where practicable. And then TEFRA notice must be complete, TEFRA hearing must be held prior to the mailing of the POS, which is fine. I get that. That's one of the things we have decided in the changes made to the guidelines. But for this record, I thought that it might make sense to say that, that we are, what we're doing is approving the process in which the TEFRA hearing and notice might not be issued before the board takes action on a particular deal, or particular financing. We've agreed to that. I'm fine with it. I'm not questioning the appropriateness of it. I just wanted to get that into the finance committee record.
Understood. Understood. Given past discussion about TEFRA and the significance of the
Yes.
TEFRA hearing.
Yes.
Understood. Very much appreciate it.
I didn't have that question. Sure. We have to take no action, we can just.
And I would imagine we would just, share the discussion that was had here in the finance committee with tomorrow.
I mean, maybe not. You don't. I don't. I just wanted to get the finance.
Okay. Thanks. Next up on deck 2 is the real estate sales tax revenue bond, or 3.
3.
3, sorry. Who's presenting that?
Good afternoon. The Finance Committee is being asked to recommend to the full board of financing on behalf of New York State. And so we're seeking the authorization for the issuance of multiple series of tax-exempt and taxable fixed and variable rate bonds, which could be issued at one or more times with a term of 30 years and an amount not to exceed $2.65 billion. And we're seeking this authorization under either the sales tax revenue bond program and or the personal income tax revenue bond program, although we expect to issue the bonds under the sales tax program. The mechanics of the two programs are very similar. The major difference is the stream of revenues that secures the bonds, sales tax revenue, as opposed to personal income tax revenue. The bonds will be issued for both new money and refunding purposes, and under the new money side, we are seeking this authorization to finance capital projects for CUNY, capital projects for OMH, OASIS, and OPWDD, a variety of capital projects for the MTA, various transportation initiatives for the New York Works Transportation Infrastructure Project Program, funding for state and municipal facilities grants, funding for other economic development grants, as well as funding for HECAP. On the refunding side, we are seeking to refund various fixed-rate bonds that have been issued under many programs, including but not limited to the Personal Income Tax Revenue Bond Program, the CUNY Senior and Community College Facilities Program, the Mental Health Services Facilities Improvement Revenue Bond Program, and the SUNY Upstate Community College Facilities Program. The candidates that we're looking to refund were all issued by either DASNY, the Empire State Development Corporation, or the Environmental Facilities Corporation. With regard to security provisions, when looking at the sales tax revenue bond program, the bonds will be paid by the semi-annual payments made pursuant to a financing agreement between DASNY and the state, and the bonds are secured by a set-aside of 1 cent or 25% of the state's 4% sales tax to be collected pursuant to statute and deposited in the sales tax revenue bond fund. The current debt service coverage on all outstanding sales tax bonds is 3.7 times. Under the PIT program, or the Personal Income Tax Revenue Bond Program, the bonds will be paid by the semi-annual payments made pursuant to the financing agreement, again, between the authority and the state. And we've talked about this, but with the recent legislative changes, the bonds are secured by a set-aside of 50% of personal income tax revenues collected pursuant to statute and 50% of the receipts of the new employer compensation expense tax, with both taxes deposited in the revenue bond tax fund. The current debt service on all outstanding personal income tax bonds is 4.9 times. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Chair? Questions?
No, I've actually had a discussion with Matt.
Do we have any idea of the projects that we funded, like the MTA projects, or?
I don't believe we have that list specifically.
No.
Budget has been working with the MTA. We're in the process of undertaking the diligence now. And so the project information will be available as we move forward.
How does it work? Doesn't the MTA like have their own bond and financing mechanisms? This is like the state's contribution to the.
So you're right, they have their own financing, they have their own programs, but there are projects for which the state
contributes, and this is how the state.
That's all legislative.
Right.
I gather that those projects undertaken by the state in the MTA, is that legislatively determined, or is that by statute, or does anybody know? I mean, it's an unfair question. Or is this an ad hoc decision-making process where the state decides what it's going to pay for?
Yeah, somehow
You think it's the
latter? I doubt that it's ad hoc. I'm not sure of the actual derivation, but we'll go back and ask the question.
I was just curious. It didn't occur to me.
Publicly, it might sound.
Well done.
And the transportation piece is through New York Works. Is that like this is funding that part of it? This doesn't go to the Thruway Authority or anything else.
Right, that's the Department of Transportation.
Any concerns from health?
No
And I know
questions,
we
no
had that
concerns.
a while, the last time we did something similar, we had a pretty in-depth presentation of the budget, and they explained why it was okay, because it was right after the tax law was passed. Those concerns are still valid today as they were 6 months ago, whenever we last did this.
Well, I mean, at this point, I think when we had a lot of discussion previously, it centered around the notion that there was going to be this new payroll tax and employer compensation expense tax program, and the discussion about the charitable contributions as sort of reforms aimed at addressing some of the things that happened at the federal level.
Yes, right. It seemed like a charitable thing,
Yep.
not be working out.
Yep, and I guess, and since that point in time when we had those discussions, in the final budget that was passed, there were changes that were made statutorily to the PIT program, which, as Matt had indicated, really increased
Yes.
the amount of revenue, so from 25% to 50%, and then in sort of the lockbox scenario, went from 25% and $6 billion to 4% of $12 billion. So the credit is actually significantly stronger in terms of those statutory changes that were made. And to your point, Jerry, to the extent that it looks as though the feds are not inclined to be supportive of the charitable contribution proposals, that aspect of sort of that aspect of the combination of the things that the state was looking to do was a thing that actually would have reduced the amount of money that would have gone into the revenue bond tax fund. So as a result, the credit should be stronger.
The rating is expected to be a stronger rating. I know the
And
controller's
it's got
office.
a triple
No, I see what I know the controller's office recently issued another sort of, like I say, warning, but caution on sales tax revenues and the state finances, but this totally negative.
And in that, he noted that
Since Sandra isn't ordering long, I know she would point out that net present value savings are being taken in the top two years. So I mentioned that.
yes.
Sandra, if you're watching, I watch this.
We will let her know that.
Well done. I found it interesting the timing of the deposits into the lockbox of both the 50% of the state tax receipts and 50% of the employer tax, because the aggregate of those deposits. Hello?
Hello.
Who's there?
I was trying to get a hold of the help desk. Actually, so I think I might have pressed the wrong option there. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Have any comments? You're welcome.
You can't make this up. But since the deposit into the lockbox of the aggregate of those two sums of money cannot include tax refunds owed to presumably New York State taxpayers, the timing must be interesting. I mean, when the money goes in must really, you have to determine what you owe taxpayers in the refund category before you can actually put the money in. So the question, when does it go in, is how do you have to know what you owe the taxpayers before you can put the money in the box, which raises the question, when does the money go in the box?
Yeah. It's only, that catch-all is only in the event of non-appropriation.
Oh, in the event of,
Non-appropriation.
oh, is that right,
tax
David?
rates, yes.
Okay, I didn't understand that.
But the sales tax receipts are put in there monthly until we meet the requirement, and then it flows, the excess goes to the state.
Oh, okay, all right, that makes sense.
That's in the lockbox. This
Yeah.
big box somewhere.
Yes.
Big box. No one knows what the box is, but it's
out there.
somewhere out there.
Secure banking.
I didn't have any further questions.
Any other questions? Mr. Gardner, I see you. Any questions or? Seeing none, so I get a motion to recommend approval of this at tomorrow's full board meeting.
So,
Second, all in favor, aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries, and that's no warning, no guidance, right? Next up, tab 4, the SUNY bond. Who's doing that one? That's the Dave. David.
Good afternoon. The Finance Committee is being asked to recommend to the full board a series of tax-exempt and/or taxable bonds to be issued under the SUNY Dormitory Facilities Revenue Bonds Program. The bonds will be sold on a negotiated basis with a term not to exceed 30 years and an amount not to exceed $150 million. Bond proceeds will be used to finance various dormitory capital projects at SUNY campuses throughout the state. The SUNY Residence Hall program operates on 25 campuses and serves over 70,000 students on an annual basis. The Residence Hall program is a completely self-supporting function of SUNY, generating sufficient revenues to support its operations, annual maintenance, and debt service. This will be the 5th financing under the new SUNY Dorms program, which goes back to 2013. It was back in March of 2013 that the state enacted legislation authorizing the new SUNY Dorms program, which is supported solely by the rents, fees, and charges of the dorm rentals. Pursuant to this enabling act, SUNY executed an assignment to DASNY of all rights and dormitory facility revenues. And SUNY is required to immediately deliver such revenues without appropriation to the Commissioner of Taxation and Finance for deposit into the SUNY Dormitory Facility Revenue Fund, which is held separate and apart from the state treasury. Monies are first used to pay debt service on the old SUNY dormitory bonds, which are the bonds issued prior to 2013, and then debt service on bonds issued under the new program, as well as to fund repair and replacement funds. Any amounts remaining in the fund after payment for such purposes is the absolute property of SUNY to fund operations and maintenance of dormitory facilities. Security for the bonds will be a second lien on the dormitory rentals deposited into the dormitory facility revenue fund. And as I mentioned, the bonds currently outstanding under the old program have the first lien on these revenues. There is currently $393.7 million outstanding under the old program and $1.263 billion outstanding under the new program. Unlike the old SUNY Dorms program, bonds issued under the current program are not a general obligation of SUNY or New York State, eliminating the state appropriation for the payment of debt service, and instead relying exclusively on revenues generated by student rents for payment of debt service. As of fall 2017, SUNY's dormitories have an occupancy rate of 96.4%, and historically that rate has been in excess of 95%. Room rental income increased over the past year due to higher volume and increases in room rates. And for fiscal year 2018, SUNY Dorms generated a total room rental income, fees, and other charges of $564.6 million, which generates a debt service coverage ratio of 1.34 to 1. And lastly, anticipated ratings for this issuance are AA3 by Moody's and A+ by Fitch. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. It's a thank you to David for this little box chart on page 4 of the summary, the State University of New York dormitory facilities operations for fiscal year. He's given us, in effect, a curve from 519.8 to 549. I'm sorry, it's actually 531.8 up to 564.6, which satisfied my need to understand the rates of the receipts and fees. So thank you, David.
I would just, your occupancy rates are clearly, most folks would be very impressed with these occupancy rates. Alfred, though, has like a 90, which is fine by itself, but still on the low end of the scale, but yet they're getting like basically a good portion of the bond. Are they doing Alfred? Like what's happening with Alfred? You know?
I don't know the specifics of the projects at Alfred. I think that rate, or that 90% utilization, has been fairly consistent over the past few years, but I don't know the specifics.
Yeah, it very well could be. They just redo facilities or old facilities or whatever.
Yeah,
it just seemed to be that they're putting a lot of money in Alfred and the utilization of
The bulk of the projects are renovation projects.
What's that?
I said the bulk of the projects are renovation projects. For the 211 of those.
Well, this is really what we do anyway. Dormitory authority. It's nice to have a real dormitory authority bond every once in a while. So
it's actually Mackenzie Hall renovations. That's the bulk of the project.
They really haven't seen any like private, around the other universities around the country. There's a whole movement where you have the private developers that develop around the campus, and their numbers are. You don't really see that here.
No, that happens, unfortunately. We do compete.
in the state, I just, you don't really see it. I see it. I know the world, it's whatever reason, it just doesn't happen. Yes, but it's not like
There are some privatized units. The first ones were done out by SUNY Buffalo a number of years ago. There's some over here, SUNY Albany. There are a number of them throughout the state. It's actually one of the things that we include some disclosure in the POS on that point. Sort of so they do exist in various
what they do is they really demand a better product for the universities. In some of these places, beautiful facilities. Cool, the whole
Yeah.
Mr. Don?
Question. Is this considered conduit debt or is this our debt? Who's
Our
the issue?
debt.
It's our debt.
Well,
So,
it's-
when we back out the conduit debt on the new balance sheet, this will stay on.
That's right.
That's
That's
really
right.
what I was asking.
Essentially, we're all part of the same family.
Yeah.
If any of the debt that is part of the state's financial statements would not be considered conduit debt.
Mike is shaking his head no.
Right, but there's still special limited obligations. We have no financial obligation
We
here.
have no financial obligation, but it's
That's true.
not considered conduit. It stays on our balance sheet.
Right, from a financial statement perspective.
That's right.
Yes. I agree with what you
Because
said.
there is no other entity that is acting as an issuer. We are the issuer. The other entity is the Tax and Finance Dormitory Facilities Revenue Fund, which probably isn't really an entity. It's a fund. It's an accounting line. Yeah.
That's an account that has
Yeah.
it.
So is that a lot of the distinction that we will be running into as we, okay.
Yes, the third party obligor has to be outside of the family.
Yeah. And if it's an accounting line, there is no third party obligor. It's in the family. I just,
This is outside of debt cap, right?
Yeah, this is not a part of the state debt cap. It's not considered state supported debt.
Any other questions or concerns?
Yeah, I just had one question. Any estimate on how sensitive the debt service coverage ratio is to occupancy? In other words, to go to debt service coverage of, say, 1-to-1, what would the occupancy look like? Any ideas?
I don't think we've done that kind of analysis. It certainly could be done, that sort of a break-even analysis. Having said that, the program is set up and SUNY Central manages the program, recognizing that there's a requirement of 1.2 times coverage.
What's the minimum?
1.2.
Any other questions, concerns?
None here.
And we do this on the construction end, we do a lot of this work, right? Thank you. Can I get a motion to recommend approval at tomorrow's board meeting?
Excuse me.
Can I get a motion to recommend approval? Thank you very much.
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that carries. Last but not least, is the tel.
Behind tab
I haven't
5.
seen one of those in a while.
Behind tab 5 is a TELP transaction from MySart in the amount of $20 million, as you know. It's the policy of Public Authority Control Board that TELP transactions which exceed $10 million be presented both to DASNY and to the city for approval. There's an attached equipment list which includes various information technology and transportation and other equipment.
So, forgive me, that I should have occurred to me before, years before. What's the magic in the $10 million policy decision? As leased equipment increases in value, that number seems to get smaller. I mean, what you can get for $10 million is less. There's no.
It's true. I mean, it was established a number of years ago. We have had discussions through the years, and Sandra actually had raised this a number of times in terms of should we seek to increase
Yes.
that
Can we recommend
level?
that, to go to
And,
15 million, or?
And actually, we did some work, Art Ware did a lot of work in terms of going back and looking at it, when this was established, sort of where was the $10 million threshold versus where we are now, to your point, in terms of just, sort of the passage of time, and so, yeah, but I mean, we can go back and.
So I've just done something that Sandra would be proud of.
For this specific one, Portia, because typically you get the hospital ones and health department is involved, and at least you have a comfort level that there's, but this is pretty broad. This is $14 million tonight for vehicles and transportation related assets. On council, okay. Okay. I'm good.
So moved.
Second, thank you, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none? That carries. Do we have anything else on the agenda? Nothing? Nothing, I'm gonna look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed, so that concludes the today's committee meeting.